Hey guys, how's it going? Kripp here. It is time for another Whispers of the Old Gods card review. There's been quite a lot of cards released lately, and not only that, there have been at very opposite extremes. We've had some very good cards and some very crappy cards. And, well, I think it's an interesting form to show you guys what's good and what isn't. So, I want to start it off big. This time we're going to start off with the new Old God that was released, N'Zoth the Corruptor. At least I think that's how it's pronounced, but the pronunciation scale of this expansion is going to be off the charts in terms of difficulty, so don't blame me if I suck at pronouncing some of these, as my history pronouncing things is not particularly good. Now, Blizzard came up with like a lore video on N'Zoth, and it basically portrayed him as the biggest badass of all the old gods, of like all the everything that there is, and well, it seems like he has that potential to be the biggest badass, but it doesn't really kind of pan out as well as you'd like currently in what we see the standard format to be like. So, most people are going to play the game, I imagine, are going to play the standard format. This seems like a card that would be really good with some of the considerations of Death Rattles from Naxxramas and GVG, which are the two sets that are rotating out of standard when the Old Gods expansion goes into the game. So, what am I really talking about here? So, any 10-mana card that doesn't impact the board immediately is complete garbage. Now, this minion, N'Zoth, he kind of is based on what died earlier in the game. He doesn't impact the board really. Like, filling the board with stuff is not really impacting the game. Impacting the game is like gaining life, putting a taunt, killing a minion. You just an immediate effect that basically affects the state of the board in a proactive sense. So he kind of does that, but only if the Death Rattle minions also have some of those effects. So what are some of the Death Rattle minions that have these effects? So there's like Sludge Belcher, like just the Taunt Death Rattle combo is probably the strongest one in my opinion. So the fact that Sludge Belcher is rotating out, and as you'll see, some of the new Death Rattle Taunt minions are not as good, let's just say. Paladin will always have like Tyrion, so I think those are the biggest two. While you can still use something like Sylvanas, you can definitely use some other very powerful Death Rattle effects. The impact effects, the I'm going to stay in the game or I'm going to seal out the game type of big momentum swings, most of those are kind of going out with GVG and Naxxramas. So that's why I don't see the card being like a superpower unless we see more Death Rattle minions released in the cards that are still left in the expansion, and there are quite a few, so there is a reasonable expectation that will be the case. This guy's range of the strength of the card is really probably the widest, so it could just be one of the best cards in the game, but unless we see more Death Rattle minions, especially ones with immediate effects like Taunt, we probably won't really see this guy doing anything. So it's entirely based on the rest of the cards. And then we have one of his minions, N'Zoth's First Mate. Warrior card, 1 mana, 1/1 is a pirate, and the pirate tag is usually an expensive one, but in this case it doesn't really have much of an expense. He equips a 1/3 Rusty Hook. Generally, if you're playing pirate synergistic type of deck, which you can as warrior, you generally want a bigger weapon than that, because most of the pirates scale off of a bigger weapon better than a small weapon. So in terms of constructed, I kind of have some doubts, but it is one of those like super aggressive cards. So with enough of them, it might actually be pretty damn good. Now, when it comes to Arena, because Arena doesn't really get impacted by the drop-off of Naxxramas and GVG as the standard format does, I would imagine this guy is amazing in Arena. Now, a 1/1 is not really anything, but at 1 mana cost, there are very few good minions. And this one equips a 1/3 weapon, and considering like a 1/4 weapon without minions, just Light's Justice is a pretty good card in Arena on its own. Having the body attached to it and the archetype is amazing. So I think this card is actually really good in Arena. We have Tentacle of N'Zoth, 1 mana, 1/1 Death Rattle, deal 1 damage to all minions. That's kind of cool. I think some of these like minions with effects that just blow up the board, that kind of stuff, I just don't think there will be a big need for them in the standard format, and in Arena they are just not really consistent enough, but I do feel a card like this will probably thrive, at least eventually, in the wild format. So yeah, some potential, but I don't think people are going to be playing mass 1 health minions once Naxxramas and GVG have rotated out. Brood of N'Zoth, 3 mana 2/2, death rattle, give your minions +1/+1. Now that is a really good effect. That is an effect that you can combo with some kind of like big, like a high number of minions, like token minions, that kind of stuff, push in the later stages of the game. So, I feel like it might be tricky to use the card. I don't think it's like a card you're going to include in just like every deck, but if you really think about it in terms of like a value sense, if you can get this guy killed when it pumps up 2 of your other minions, you basically get a 3 mana 4/4. And that's pretty good when it comes to just trying to tempo out your opponent. So it seems like a card that would work pretty well in decks that have a lot of minions, probably like Zoo-like decks. But, there's still quite a lot of very competitive cards for the Zoo-like decks. So I don't know if it will really be like the top tier or just mid tier. But I do believe this card will see some play in those type of archetypes. In terms of Arena's pretty aggressive on one hand, but on the other hand, you have to imagine that most 3-drops are just kind of there to catch you up on the board. So if you have a 3-drop that trades for a 2-drop, if the effect is good enough, you can kind of use that. So even though you don't really want to play this and lose it against just another 2-drop, the flexibility that it can do that makes it a pretty decent Arena card as well. But I think it'll see more playing constructed than Arena. We have Infested Tauren. This is the taunt death rattle minion that I was talking about. Well, there is not really much to talk about. The death rattle spawns a 2/2 slime, and if you sum up all the stats on the minion, it's like 4 mana for 4/5, and it's split across 2 creatures and all that. It's kind of okay. It's kind of okay if you really get to look at all the abilities involved, the fact that it's split, the fact that it resists board clears a little bit. But, would you really play this card? Like, even though the stats are good, they're just not split well enough. I feel like if the game was very aggressive and people were playing like a ton of 1/1 minions, like a ton of 1-drops, the stats would kind of work out. There would be merit for them, but I think we're going to gravitate away from that. And, when people are playing actual like Yeti-like 4-drops, a card like this one loses a ton of value. So I don't think it'll be that good, but because it's got the dual body, because it's got the taunt, it's still going to be an okay Arena card, and it's still going to be an okay Zoo card. Then we have Doom. Now this is what I was talking about when I was mentioning some really crappy cards. Doom is a really crappy card. We have Twisting Nether, which is only played in like the combo control, usually Reno Warlock, which is a very, very small proportion of decks, by the way. It's almost nobody plays that, and nobody else plays Twisting Nether. And it seems like you would play Twisting Nether over Doom. So you'd have to play Twisting Nether and then also play Doom. So yeah, that kind of restricts the how wide the playability is of this card. I think it'll fit into exactly that deck still. The type of deck that used this card was a deck that basically didn't have any minions and was just trying to draw it to the point where it could get its combo. But the difference between 8 and 10 mana is really big. You can't do anything when you play a 10 mana card. So I think the card is really quite bad. But some very specific Warlock list will probably include the card still, but I don't really think it's going to make that big of an impact. Then we have Renounce Darkness. So as you guys just saw, this is an epic quality or an epic rarity Warlock card, and the previous card, Doom, is also an epic Warlock card. So there actually are a lot of class cards. This actually triggered me to look into how the distribution of rarity works in the Old Gods expansion. So there are going to be 9 class cards, presumably. 3 common, 3 rare, 2 epic, and 1 legendary for each class, which means, there's 9 classes. That's 81 class cards. That is a pretty high proportion of the whole set. So it looks like Old Gods is really out there to define the classes and to give them the option to use some of these like really big legendary minions, which are probably going to be centered around the theme of the Old Gods. Renounce Darkness is a very peculiar card. It's a 2 mana Warlock card. Replace your hero power and Warlock cards with another classes. the cards cost 1 less. So this seems like a really bad card because generally when you build a deck that aims to do one thing, and when you're getting random cards of another class rather than using the cards you deliberately put in your deck, not only are you typically going to get lower quality cards, you're typically going to get significantly worse synergy between the cards. Now, there is one note that I think people really forget when they look at this card, and the reason why I think it has actually some redeeming qualities. So when you're playing a control Warlock, or when you're playing any control deck, you usually have a few cards that just don't really work out. So in a lot of cases, sometimes when you're playing like control warrior, you'll realize that you just have more removal than your opponent has big minions to remove. So you end the game with like 2 or 3 hard removal cards in your hand that are just sitting there, and a few other board clear cards that are never really merit using. There's a lot of instances where control decks just don't match up perfectly when it comes to going the distance. So you always have a handful of throwaway cards if you go through the entire deck. And if you go through the entire deck, the Warlock hero power is absolutely the worst one. If you're at the stage where you have almost no cards in your deck, you do not want to draw more cards, and you do not want to take more damage for no reason. So Renounce Darkness kind of solves both of these issues. It's just that, we're going to have a really control-dominated game if you're going to run into this situation constantly. But Warlock is a pretty good control class, and this card does make a big difference when it comes to that specific stage in the game. So, I actually have to say, this is a pretty good card if we actually get to that stage in the game. So, if we're at a place where a lot of people are playing control decks, and Warlock control is one of the good variations of the control decks, then Renounce Darkness is going to have a spot in that deck, I believe. Then we have a rogue card, Undercity Huckster, 2 mana, 2/2 Death Rattle, and a random class card to your hand from your opponent's class. So it's kind of like the Burgle effect, gimme, a bit at random. It's not too bad. Drawing a class card is, in my opinion, maybe slightly worse, but roughly as good as just drawing a card. So you have a 2 mana, 2/2 that kind of draws a card. That's pretty good, really. That's quite good. So I think it'll be pretty good arena card, and I think it'll be an okay rogue card. It's just that we lost a lot of the Death Rattle minions from GVG and Naxxramas being removed from the standard format. So it seems like rogue is getting this one, and if we move on to the next card, the rogue legendary also has Death Rattle. It seems that there's a lot of Death Rattle synergistic cards, and it seems like rogue is going to take the biggest advantage from that. So, not only do you have the option to play the newly released N'Zoth Old God because of Death Rattle interactions and more interactions playing rogue, you also have some synergy from some of the cards that really seem kind of bad with those sets being removed in the standard format. Cards like the Raptor. The Raptor actually has a few more targets that are pretty good. So yeah, maybe this is like the new identity of rogue. Maybe it's no longer make a big weapon and crap on your opponent with Blade Flurry. Maybe it's no longer that. So Zariel, Poison Mind, 4 mana, 3/2 Battlecry Death Rattle adds a random toxin to your hand. The stats are poor, but what are the toxins? Now these are the toxins. There's 5 of them. Apparently. They have some pretty good effects. They're better than spare parts, except for the stealth, which is exactly the same as a spare part, but the stealth spare part is pretty broken in a lot of cases. So, it seems like they're, at least one tier above spare parts, and because it has like the toxin thing, it might actually mean that there's going to be more interactions with toxins. Maybe there's going to be other cards that produce toxins or something like that. I kind of feel like the toxins are almost one card. I think 2 toxins are better than 1 card, and because they're spells and because they're 1 mana, which enable combos and all that, Zariel is basically like 4 mana, 3/2, and draw like 1.5 cards. Is that good? Yeah, it's okay. Is it great? Nah, it's not too great. But, it's okay. And you can have a lot of synergy surrounding this type of effect. And, of course, The Shaman Legendary. I have already reviewed this one. Blizzard was kind enough to let me reveal the card to the world, and I made a video all about it. Just my 2 cents on the card kind of summarizes that. It's a good card. Overall, it can be used in an aggressive situation because sometimes having a little bit of extra HP to work with gets you another card draw. The fact that the stats are just straight up good for its mana cost kind of gives you that flexibility, but I think aggressive decks will try to be more aggressive than including a 5-drop. Mid-range decks are going to love this card. Mid-range decks have some board clears, and control shamans are really going to love this card. Now, is this card by itself going to enable control shamans? No, definitely not. But if there is a little bit more help throughout the other Shaman cards yet to be released, Halaziel will make a huge impact in Control Shaman. If you combo a board clear effect, maybe you have like a Lightning Storm or maybe even an Elemental Destruction, you can heal for almost your entire HP pool while clearing the board, while developing the board, while not even spending your entire mana pool for the turn. So you can have ridiculously big turns using Halaziel, and I think so far it might just be one of the best cards released yet in Old Gods. And we have a priest card, Herald Volage. I think that's how you say it. I don't know. Okay, 6 mana, 5/5 priest legendary. Battlecry, summon a 1/1 copy of each of your other minions. So this is like a really weird effect. You kind of need to have a board already, but you can't have too big of a board because it doubles up on your board and it is a card by itself. If you have 3 minions and you play this guy, you're going to just instantly fill the board. So the sequencing and the time in the game where you can play this guy for it to be good is quite specific. The most you're going to get is 3 1/1s, so the most you're going to get in terms of stats is 6 mana for 8/8 worth of stats, but it's spread across multiple minions. So it's pretty good. If you just play this guy and your 3 other minions do absolutely nothing, you're still playing 8 mana worth of stuff for 6 mana. Kind of. So it's okay. It's not a bad card. It's not a bad card. It's really going to come down to how powerful you can push some of the synergy, because this is going to copy the effects of your other cards. So what effects are worth copying? So Divine Shields kind of make a big impact. End of turn and start of turn effects make a really big impact, like if you have an Emperor or if you have a Ragnaros. Just because your Ragnaros is a teeny little dude and he only has a 1/1 doesn't mean he won't smack your opponent in the face for 8 at the end of the turn. And also, primarily, I think this card will be used in conjunction with Death Rattle effects, but we just don't really have that many of those right now. So it's probably not going to be spectacular right now, but it does seem a straight up good card. The main other consideration is kind of a weakness to the card, and that's because it's a priest card. Most of the priest decks don't really have the tendency to push for the board. They have the tendency to clear your opponent's board and just play one thing that they hopefully can't deal with. So in that type of play style, this card actually really sucks. But if a different type of priest deck is available where you are more towards pushing and trying to tempo out your opponent, kind of like a Dragon Priest-like deck, I think this card will see some play in that type of format. And we have Tentacles for Arms. This is a warrior weapon, if you were curious, but you're probably not that curious because the card is abysmal. It's 5 mana, 2/2, and the Death Rattle returns this to your hand. So, yeah, I guess it's all right when you are in like a complete attrition situation, but still, 2 damage is so low. It hardly kills anything, which means you have to attack something probably several times. This card is it's just completely out there, I think it might see some play in Arena. It's not like the worst Arena card, but it's close. It's close to the worst Arena card. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about putting it into your constructed deck. Basically, this card is worth 100 dust, is what I'm saying. Speaking of dust, the Boogeymonster. This is probably the most disappointing card I've seen so far from the Old Gods. Now you might look at it and be like, wow, 8 mana, 6/7, but when you kill something, you gain +2/+2. That's really cool. No, it's really not. No, it's not really cool at all. For the effect to trigger, he has to attack and kill Okay, those are very significant. Like, if this minion was just, whenever this minion kills another minion, gain +2/+2, that'd be pretty alright, because you'd give it taunt, and then it would just soak up a million small little dudes and just never die, and that would be actually a reason to play an 8 mana cost legendary. Are you serious, right? But no, he has to attack a minion and kill it to gain +2/+2. So the most he can really gain, unless he has Wind Fury, which, you know, don't kid yourself. Don't even try to make a Wind Fury deck with this guy. The most he's going to get is +2/+2 every single turn, and he's an 8 mana 6/7. So, okay. So you can just play Kvalda Raider, which is basically a 6/6 for 7 mana, which is better than a 6/7 for 8 mana, and you basically guarantee his ability every single turn because you can just trigger your hero power and do it that way, rather than having to kill something. And it's also a pretty big consideration, because usually when you spend a lot of your mana on one minion, that minion has to win the game for you. And winning the game for you does not usually mean sending your 8 mana cost investment into like a 2 mana card. Winning the game in Hearthstone usually means that when you're playing an 8 drop, you are going towards face and trying to seal out the game as fast as possible. So the Boogeymonster has absolutely no synergy with anything at all, really. It's terrible for its mana cost. It costs way too much mana, and it's just still super easy to remove. There are no like on-play effects or no death. It's just nothing. This card sucks. This is like the Hemet of the set. It's just horrible. Then lastly, we have Faceless Shambler. 4 mana, 1/1 taunt, and the battle cry puts a copy of a friendly copies of friendly minions' attack and health. So that's really cool. I think some people, see this card as kind of a bad thing, but it has some extreme synergy off some other cards. It works very well with the cannot attack minions like Eerie Statue. If you play Eerie Statue, then you play this guy. This guy's going to be a 4 mana 7/7 taunt that can attack, because it doesn't copy the effect. That's really important. It also works very well with Power Overwhelming. You can Power Overwhelm something, then play this guy, and you basically just play this guy onto whatever minion you had, plus a free Kings. So it's a huge, huge tempo swing, potentially. It's really just going to have to be put in decks that can really rely on having a minion on the board. And basically all those decks are Warlock decks. So I think it will see a spot in some kind of Warlock deck, specifically the Reno Warlock, because Reno Warlock has to include a lot of these like wild one-offs, and this card just seems to work pretty well in that type of format. Overall, the cards released in this little batch have been pretty good, and I am pretty excited to see, because as we progress through the cards, as we see more and more of the set, we get to see the bigger picture, we get to see the synergies between the cards, and we get to see just kind of like the macro ideas and playstyles. And so far, what I'm seeing is zoo and control. Not much in terms of aggro cards, not much in terms of that stuff at all, and I think this is going to be a really good era of Hearthstone to play. So, hope you guys agree, hope you guys have enjoyed my review, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.